You know those Instagram posts where someone is leading their partner towards something beautiful? Well, there is another side to that story. It's the person being dragged behind. Too often we like to paint a picture that our travels are perfection. This idyllic photo here doesn't show all of the tedious aspects that went into making it. And collectively, along with everyone else doing the same thing, it creates an expectation that just can't be met. So I wanted to address that imbalance and talk about a time where one of our holidays didn't quite go as we'd hoped.
Lovely weather we're having here. Having a great time.
Although you wouldn't have known it from my posts at the time. It was July 2019 and we had just booked our second trip to the Maldives. Now I'm going to talk you through our expectations, the actual reality we were faced with when we arrived, and what I learned from it all. And hopefully, dear viewer, what I hope you might remember whilst planning your next holiday, no matter the destination. This is Suitcase Monkey, trying to show you it's okay if everything isn't okay. We've been fortunate enough to visit the Maldives twice now. The first time was in the dry season of February, and it was the closest I've ever been to paradise. The second time we took a chance and went during the wet season in July. Now, specifically for this kind of holiday, this is a place where you really keep your fingers crossed for good weather. All the things I talked about in my first Maldives video relies on sunny days. The thing we spent most of our time doing here was just existing in nirvana. But July was when we were available, and due to it being wet season there were some really good deals on, so we took a chance. The second thing that raised the stakes slightly for this trip was the cost. Because if a trip to the Maldives was just a $5, then you might as well just give it a try, wet season or not. But this holiday was the most we've ever spent on a single trip, ever. Looking specifically at our second visit, we spent just under £2,000 per person for just 6 nights. £2,000 for 6 nights. Now that's £326 a day or £13 an hour to exist in this paradise. And admittedly, for a third of that, I was asleep. Now I did work it out, folks. I had a slightly long trip to the bathroom on day 2. That cost me £8. Now admittedly, this money got us a beautiful over-the-water villa, all-inclusive food and drink, speedboat transfers, flights from London, and a dolphin cruise. But the point is, if you're willing to spend that much money, do you want this to be your welcome? Wet and windy, our welcome buggy drove us to our villas, and I can't lie, my holiday excitement was slightly dampened. There's a reason that this isn't on the brochure. The irony is that this was the London weather that we left behind. Now compare this arrival to what I had in my memory from our first trip to the Maldives, where our arrival was almost magical. Fortunately, however, the rain only lasted a couple of hours and gave us some time to get acquainted with my favourite thing about this sort of holiday, the lavish, over-the-water villa, which was simply heavenly. Without a doubt, my favourite moments of our first trip was waking up in the morning, looking over calm waters, and breathing it all in almost total silence. So, I crossed my fingers for the rest of our trip. How much would rain impact our next 5 days? Had we made a massive error in spending all that money? But at least the rest of our first day was a success in every sense of the word. We couldn't have asked for a better day too. Sunny, hot weather, a tasty breakfast, a spot of sunbathing, lunch, snorkeling, and a divine dinner. The only thing that was starting to have a little impact on our idyllic holiday life was the copious amounts of construction going on throughout the island. Whilst booking, the small print did say there would be some works going on, but it was much more widespread than we'd been led to believe. Late on our third morning, however, there was a very clear sign on the horizon. And we didn't know it then, but we just turned an important corner in our time here. We would not be seeing a blue sky again for the next 3 days. Now, I've heard people mention before with the Maldives that it might just be a quick burst of rain here or there, those tropical storms that come and go, which wasn't really the case for us, because what that translated to was an entire evening rained off, or lost mornings and afternoons, or just grey, sunless skies that lasted for days, which actually made up the majority of our 6 nights here. The worst part though wasn't actually the rain, it was the strong winds, and not just for having sand blown in your face half the time. Our pre-booked dolphin trip was unfortunately cancelled due to the stormy conditions, which we'd obviously been really looking forward to. But just going back to sunnier times for a second, let me try and recreate the scene for you of dining in the Maldives. Beautiful, isn't it? The sea, the wildlife by your side, pure bliss. You'll notice that the dining areas here don't have any hard walls, so there are no physical barriers between you and your surroundings. Closer to nature. Just keep those feelings in mind for a minute. Unfortunately, this means that when it isn't sunny, the only thing keeping you from the elements is some flimsy plastic, which flaps around like it's trying to fly. Looking back on this footage though, the constant sound of all this flapping plastic doesn't really come through, so let me just recreate the scene for you. This is not relaxing. There was one evening we awoke in the middle of the night and I literally thought I was about to die. I could almost feel the roof separating from the walls around me. The wind was howling around us and it felt like we were in the eye of the storm. But, can you believe it? It turns out that I was just being over-dramatic. Although in my defence, I did see a piece of villa floating by the next day, so I don't think I was that far off. Fortunately, on our last day, we finally got what we'd been waiting for. So, what does this all mean? Well, firstly, as a slight aside to anyone thinking of visiting the Maldives during rainy season, I'd say if you're only planning on visiting once, I think it is worth paying the higher price, or waiting for the dry season just so you can have the odds in your favour of getting everything you imagine, which makes it easier to justify the cost. If you've been before, then I think it's worth the chance as long as you're happy with the possible inconveniences. But secondly, having said all that, I think it's important to focus on why we travel in the first place. Because if it is to spend time with your loved ones in another setting, especially after a global pandemic, then you're going to enjoy all of that, whether it's raining or not. The other side to this story is that we still found humour and good times in our less than perfect situation. We still got to enjoy the island's wildlife, still indulged in too much food and drink, and still had 2 of those perfect mornings. And we were together through all of it. As mentioned at the start of this video, it's easy to get too hung up on living the life you see on Instagram, and that subconsciously becoming your barometer of a good time. Or even living that impeccably organised trip you might have seen, even on this very channel. And organisation's good to an extent, but I think it's more important to not lose sight of why we travel in the first place. To spend time with loved ones, to explore another culture, to just be somewhere different, and that in itself is enough to look forward to and cherish. So it's okay if everything isn't okay. So as much as I want that ideal holiday that I saw someone else have, it's important to remember that travelling is such a privilege, more now than ever, and I hope I don't lose sight of that when travel opens up again. So I wanted to make this video to show a time where everything wasn't as we'd hoped, but it was still worth every penny. Thanks for watching. Suitcase Monkey.